So can you give us a little bit of an explanation of like what visceral manipulation is in a relatively condensed form, and then how you use it in your practice when you're working with clients?
Yeah. So visceral manipulation is a type of treatment from the.
Hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Female Empowered. And I am stoked to have the Anna Hartman, the Movement Rev, with me today. And I was just telling her pre-show that I think, Anna, you are the first return guest I have on the podcast. So I'm excited for that. We're going into double rounds. So I'm going to give a very brief and general introduction of who you are, but will definitely not do service to everything you do. So Anna is based in California, in San Diego, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so she has a long-standing history in health and wellness as an athletic trainer. And I know you worked with Exos, was really kind of like how everything got started. But she is a plethora of information, and the amount of knowledge she has in her brain is amazing. And she also, one of the things I love about her is that, and I don't know if I told you this, but I think you also explain it in ways that are very easy for those of us, the rest of us, to understand, and not with this kind of like ego, I know it all type, and my way is the highway situation. And so I've learned so much from you over the last couple of years, and really all online, because I just follow you on social media. And we met at PMA, so the Pilates Method Alliance. How long ago was that?
I think it was in 2016. It was the Arizona,
gosh, yes,
right? The Arizona
yes.
PMA. Mm-hmm.
That was a long time ago.
That was 2016. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that might have been my first big presentation, and I think I was so nervous, and they gave me one like in the middle of, there was only two options, so you could go to mine or someone else's, and I was like, why are you putting me in this one? Yeah. So anyways, Anna, why don't you take the mic now and really give us a little bit more background into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be a repeat guest for you.
Woo-hoo.
So exciting. And also that PMA, I did not know it was like the first time you did that, and it was amazing. And I can't remember why I picked it other than it sounded interesting. And like, obviously I'd already been in business, but I was like, I wonder what she has to say. And it just was like, yes, what I needed to hear. And I think I reached out to you afterwards being like, thank you. Yes. So,
and then that started like an online friendship. See how this happens? Yeah. So it's great.
So, thank you for having me again. And, like you said, my name's Anna Hartman. I'm an athletic trainer. I'm based in San Diego, California, and which feels a lot like Oregon right now, raining a ton. But really, a lot of what I do is not in San Diego. I work with professional athletes, and so I travel all around the country taking care of them. So wherever they are living or playing or training or competing, wherever they need me, I sort of follow them. And so every year looks a little bit different based on who my clients are. In addition to that, as you said, I teach online and I teach in-person courses. So I do a little bit of both, working hands-on with athletes, which really is my love. And then teaching other professionals, which I love to share. I love to learn. So it's just like a perfect way to be doing what, more learning equals more sharing sort of in my brain. And like you said, I get that from a lot of people. A lot of people tell me that it's really easy to learn from me. I make it really simple and really good at assimilating a bunch of information and sort of blending it all together and see sort of like big picture how it all works. I don't know how I do that. That's just how my brain works. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that it is a gift to others because like I said, I'm a people pleaser too. So, and like I'm a caregiver. So I love helping people out. I've been in business for myself now since 2014. And as you said, I started my career at Exos back in the day when it was called Athletes Performance. I started there in 2003 as an intern, kind of hung around long enough until they felt like they needed to start paying me, is sort of the joke. And then I became assistant athletic trainer, and then full-time, and then the manager of the physical therapy department in Arizona, and then the director of all the physical therapy departments throughout the facilities in the country. And then I was part of their performance innovation team, and then went back to sort of staff athletic trainer. And that's when I decided to part ways and do my own thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think there was I have a lot of questions that we're going to get into, but it clicked in my head when you said I started as an intern and then they decided to start paying me. And I think we won't go down this rabbit hole because it's a totally separate podcast episode, but I think that's definitely different then as to now, and people coming out of school now. So I graduated from school in 99. So a few years before that, and same thing, like I worked for free for a basketball team. I was a trainer for a little bit of time. And I was just like, yes, please. And I'm not saying that to tell people like, you should not ask to get paid. That's not my point in that,
right.
But there is value, I think, in it's called like forward thinking almost versus short-sighted thinking, and just being like, this opportunity for me to be in the room with these people or to learn from this person, even though I'm sacrificing money now per se, the outcome 5, 10, 15 years down the road is going to be tenfold, right? Yes. Versus like, hey, I'm out of school, I just graduated, I know about like 5% of what I need to know to actually be successful in this industry, but I think I deserve 6 figures today. Yes. Versus I'd even pay someone right now. There are people that I follow, like you're one of them, Perry Nicholson is one of them. There's a few other practitioners that I'd be like, I would pay to be in the room with you for a week. Like I would pay you to follow you around for a week, just so that I could absorb your thought process, your mechanism, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a whole aside, but
no, I mean, I know you're right. It was when we graduated from school, it was much more common to work for free for people. Now I think there's like a kind of a stigma around like it's a labor law issue to do that. You have to like trade it for class credit or something like that. But yeah, I just saw the value, and like I didn't see it as, I joke like working for free, but it's like, no, like I received so much from every internship that I did, but I also picked them very strategically. And I never stayed in one that I didn't feel like I was getting more value than I was giving.
Exactly.
So it was, so I never felt taken advantage of. I never, if anything, I felt like I was taking advantage of them, like pulling out all this knowledge and stuff. So
absolutely. And it's just a way of looking like not in the immediate, like not today, but what is this experience going to allow me in the future?
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, and that's what I think too, with the whole, like the joke I make about, I stuck around Athletes Performance Exos long enough so that they felt like they need to start paying me. And really what I mean by that is I stuck around long enough. So instead of me just taking the value out of them, they started seeing how valuable I was. And so they didn't have to start paying me. They wanted to, because they saw that I was something special and they didn't want me to leave. Right. Yes. I did leave. And then they called me and were like, actually, we're going to need you back, because since you left, we noticed that you're not here anymore. And so I think that's like an important piece to think about too, when it comes to internships, is like, it's like an opportunity to have a long-term job interview.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I got hired from one of my PT
Yeah.
clinicals,
Yeah.
and same thing. And I eventually left because I actually worked, my first job out of school was in Las Vegas, and then I eventually moved home, but I built great relationships there. And if I ever needed to go back, I, I know that I haven't burned a whole lot of bridges, or so I
Right.
think. Maybe in my head, apparently, maybe I have.
Right.
But anyways, okay. So where
Yeah.
you went from, and correct me if my assumption's wrong, but definitely more of like an orthopedic performance experience,
Yes.
to now, it's not all you do, but you do definitely like visceral manipulation, and everything you learned at the Burrell Institute has, is it, if it's not of the forefront of your expertise, it's
Right.
definitely an integral part of everything you do. So
Yes.
how, and maybe can you just explain for maybe somebody that doesn't understand what visceral manipulation is and that kind of stuff? So what was the bridge that kind of got you to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So my like bread and butter is still really like orthopedic performance based movement science. And like sports medicine. And 10 years ago, I started learning visceral manipulation. I had heard about it from a colleague, and I thought it was interesting, but I didn't really see the value in it until my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer. And I realized that symptoms that she was complaining of for like 10 to 15 years before her diagnosis, like orthopedic symptoms, she was going to physical therapy for and not really having any success, those were actual visceral referral symptoms of her lung to her shoulder pain, to her neck pain, to her finger numbness, things the doctors labeled as a rotator cuff strain, poor posture, lack of activity, and arthritis, right? And the physical therapist that she went to, instead of sort of evaluating her and ruling out differential diagnoses like cancer, just took the diagnosis the doctor wrote on the script and ran with it instead of sort of doing their own assessment. And so that was when I was like, holy crap, when my colleague, Veronica Campbell, had shared about visceral manipulation, like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but here it is, like, me not knowing this, I'm no different than that physical therapist my mom went to, like, I realized I was doing a huge disservice for my clients, not understanding what was going on more on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And how that related to the musculoskeletal system. And for whatever reason, like this first day of anatomy class back in undergrad at University of Oregon, like always sticks out in my head, which is funny because it's like, of all the days of classes, like, why did I remember like this fact that the Dr. Strom had said? And it was basically like, we opened our, handouts, and it was like, role of the musculoskeletal system, and the first bullet listed was protect the organs. And it was also just something that we kind of like brushed over. And then it was like, okay, move the body, let's now learn all the muscles and the origin and assertion and action. And I feel like, wow, like, first day, first bullet point, we talked about this, and then we just ignore it for the rest of the career, right? And our industry is so biased by the musculoskeletal system and by biomechanics, we just sort of forget that the rest of the human organism really drives a lot of things. And so that's really how I got introduced to it. And yeah, that is, there was one thing, when I left, because I started at Athletes Performance Exos right out of school, and helped develop their, curriculum, right? The way they did things. I was one of the team members who created the training, and created the sort of methodologies and philosophies that is what Exos is today. And because of that, when I left Exos, I didn't really know who I was as a practitioner versus who I was as Exos's employee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so And, at one point, like they were together, but it's sort of like I kept on growing and changing, and they couldn't or didn't along with my path. And so it's sort of like started diverge. So I had this, few years of after I first started that I was really trying to like find myself both personally and professionally. And that's when I started actually teaching again. It was very important to me that I not continue teaching Exos's stuff. I could have, because like I said, I was part of the group of people who created it. So it was as much mine as it was theirs. But I didn't want to, like, because I knew that I had something different to offer the world. Than that, and that was part of the reason why I left. And so I actually had a pause between a lot of my teaching, between leaving Exos and starting. And that was sort of me kind of figuring out how it all fit together and how to blend all this new visceral manipulation, neural manipulation, more osteopathic point of view into this more traditional sports medicine. Because as I was learning the osteopathic work from the Burrell Institute, there was some very conflicting ways of thinking about the body, ways of thinking about movement, ways of thinking about treatment, that I realized that I couldn't successfully treat people with just having them be apart from each other. Like, in order for it, I either had to go all in on one or all in the other, or I had to figure out how it could work together. And so I really spent some time doing that and like figuring out how I could blend it together. And like I said, I had been told by colleagues before that I had learned and onboarded at Exos, other physical therapists, athletic trainers, strength coaches, like I had been told by them like that I did such a good job of assimilating information. So I sort of just kind of leaned into that and started writing down exactly what I did and exactly what my thought process was, and like trying to organize it. And that's really how I came up with what the movement rev methodologies are currently, and what system I use and that kind of thing. So it's been quite the journey.
For sure. Well, and I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you went that route,
Yeah.
because selfishly, I've learned a lot from listening to you. And I think I think as all practitioners kind of come out of school, at least this was my experience also, I thought I was going to be big ortho. Actually, when I first came out of school, when I went into school, I thought I was going to be big ortho. I was going to work for a sports team. I was an athletic trainer. I was a student trainer in high school and even at University of Michigan. Like, so that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Then I was like, I don't really know if this is what I want to do. I mean, first of all, back in the day, it was really hard for women to be there. That just was. Second of all, I was like, I don't know if I want to give up my life for that. It's very much travel, and they don't actually get paid very well. And then I started, my love was spinal cord. So when I came out of PT school, spinal cord was my love. And I did learn a lot but then it was also very emotional and physical.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of practice, at least ones that are curious, and I'm very into, like, I love learning. And so I very similarly, like I would take, NKT, myofascial release, craniosacral, taping. I mean, basically anything that I thought would enhance my ability to evaluate, assess, and then treat someone, I took. And then I just kind of piecemeal together things that I was very comfortable with. I understood, they spoke to me. So I don't believe that there's like my way is the only way. I just know that this works for me and my method of teaching and my method of assessing. And that's kind of, like been my journey, or mapped my journey to be where I am today. And I think a lot of, if we listen to our intuition and say like this, is what speaks to us now. And I could tell you that it might not have spoken to me when I first came out of school, because I was so like in the weeds of goniometry, and like clinical skills and like all these special tests. Like, it took me being in the profession for a while to start understanding that stuff. And I'll tell you, I think I'm an anatomy nerd, but let me tell you, your anatomy like unbelievable. And the way that you just like spew it out, like, oh, and we have this, and then the nerve passes through here, and then this is just like, I'm like, it's like she's breathing. And I thought I was an anatomy geek. So kudos to you for that. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
It's I do have my semi photographic memory to thank for that. So it's like I literally just see it in my head, and I just either see, like, I was lucky too in undergrad and in grad school. I worked in the anatomy lab. I did dissection. I taught, like I was a lab assistant. So I have also like spent a lot of time with anatomy.
Yeah. But so have I, and you still know anatomy. Like I was the GA in gross anatomy for 3 years in grad school. And that's why I'm saying, like, I thought I was like, but I was like, girl, she like, you've got it down.
I do love anatomy. And the Barral Institute is like, all their courses are like heavy on anatomy. And I think Jean-Pierre Barral, what I hear from the other teachers, that like he still studies anatomy like every morning. Just like there's just so much to learn. And so
I think there is too. Don't you think that there's more, like more stuff will come out more, and our human body hasn't really changed that much, right? Yeah. But it's amazing when people continue to study it, how they find new things.
Yes. Well, and just because there is so much, like whenever we do study it, we were just looking at it, one perspective at one point in time of it. And so it's like, one of my teachers at the Barral Institute, Ron Mariotti, I just took the advanced neck and thorax class from him, and he actually said a quote about that. Is basically like the anatomy we talk about is like 30% of the whole picture. It's just like what we're talking about at this moment, and like, but in order to understand the next pieces, like we have to understand this. And so it's like it was virtually the same anatomy we talked about in the original thorax and neck class, but it was like I saw it so differently this time. And so it was just a really unique understanding of like, you can know it, but there's just always so much. And then it is a field that things are still being discovered. And so it's like our understanding of it. And I don't think we'll ever really will know 100% everything, because there's no way to really study it in a live being. And so I think we are always sort of behind the 8 ball a little bit of our knowledge of anatomy, because the only way we can study it really is, post-mortem. Mm-hmm.
And then it's obviously changed.
Then it's not the same. Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can you give us a little bit of an explanation of like what visceral manipulation is in a relatively condensed form, and then how you use it in your practice when you're working with clients?
Yeah. So visceral manipulation is a type of treatment from the osteopathic type of evaluation and treatment. So it's very gentle. So manipulation, the way we use it in the United States, actually makes it sound a little bit intense, because we think of manipulation as like grade 5 joint manipulation, chiropractic type of high velocity manipulation. But manipulation in Europe is just another word for like mobilization. And it's actually extremely gentle, very light touch. It relies on the practitioner's hand and their ability to feel through the receptors in their hand, qualities within the tissue that are evoked in certain types of viscera. So for example, the liver is going to feel much different than the stomach. As we know, the liver is a lot harder than the stomach, which is a hollow organ. So just like we learned in school, when we learned how to do like tapping over to hear percussion, hear audio, influence of hollow and non-hollow organs, those qualities can also be picked up by touch. And so it's using our hands to mobilize the viscera, the ligaments around the viscera, the cells within the viscera itself, to either improve sensory information of that organ to the brain, just like when we're touching the skin and joints in manual therapy, right? Or to facilitate movement of the organ within the container. So it's very similar to musculoskeletal manual therapy. It's just that because we can't really see the organs, it seems a little smoke and mirrors to people.
And I think that some people, even physical therapists, so I mean, when I came out of school, nobody was talking about visceral manipulation. And if they were, I skipped that day because I don't even remember. Not even. We certainly spoke about our organs, but they were literally there to keep us alive. Like we had cardio and everything. So
you don't even learn really, like you kind of learn how they're attached to the skeleton, but not really.
You know what their like function is, and we had to memorize like, you know, how the blood comes into the heart, you know, all the vena cava and all that stuff. But besides that, we don't really discuss it for sure.
No,
and
not at all.
So even myself, who I think I'm a really good therapist, like, and like you said, and it's one of those things, it's very similar to when I did some Schroth training and I was like, I'm a damn good therapist. And I didn't know how to properly treat someone that really had scoliosis.
Right.
So once you learn, you can't like unlearn, right?
Right.
And so when I started watching some of your educational content, I was like, for me, I was like, I need to be the best therapist I possibly can be. So I want to learn this so that if someone does come across my table, that I do think there's something like another red flag, so to speak.
Right.
I have at least the knowledge to say, I think something else might be going on here.
Yes.
Let's evaluate that. I don't even care to be, well, I do want to be better, but it may not even be that I can properly treat it, but I can see the signs enough to say there's something else going on here. So
yes,
if you can walk us through maybe, let's take the shoulder because you were talking about the shoulder. So how would you now, knowing what you know now, you're evaluating a shoulder, someone's coming in for shoulder pain. And maybe during your subjective history, you might be thinking impingement syndrome or something of that sort. Can you walk me through maybe what happens to lead you to say, no, I don't think this is orthopedic. I think it's more going the other route?
Yeah. The shoulder, actually the upper extremity in general is interesting because it is, I would say 99.8% of the time, it is never going to be an actual upper extremity problem that is limiting them from decreasing their pain or improving their range of motion, right? Or improving their function, because they're there because usually the person is there. Let's say it's not post-surgical because that's sort of a different type of patient. So if somebody's coming to you with shoulder pain, they are in pain or they have a loss of function or a combination of both. And whatever they're doing on their own is not helping. And probably what they're doing on their own is nothing or something specifically to the area that hurts. Okay. So, your job is to decrease their pain, improve their function, but figure out why it's happening in the first place, which it's like not the argument of the biomechanics. So if it is impingement, what causes impingement? Well, let's say it's like a secondary impingement from scapular dyskinesis. That is definitely happening. If you evaluate them and they're like lacking upward rotation and the subacromial space is being limited and there is impingement happening there, like that is true. I'm not denying that. But it's like a different layer of like, well, where is that coming from? And in musculoskeletal bias, it's like, oh, it's coming from bad posture or weakness of your parascapular muscles or a instability of your glenohumeral joint or all of those together because of repetitive use or because it's your dominant shoulder, or, you know, you start putting all these stories on people that may or may not be true. But when you have a visceral lens of view, when you have this osteopathic lens of view, that the viscera are the most important thing to the body, that the musculoskeletal system is going to be in a protective pattern when the viscera are not functioning well or not moving well, then you start to look at shoulder pain as something different, because you're like, okay, so if their shoulder blade is downwardly rotated and protracted, what organ could it be protecting, right? So most common for the shoulder, the right shoulder especially, is going to be a liver protection pattern. So you could understand when the body's in a protection pattern, it sort of goes and hugs that area. And so you could easily see how that would bring my scapula into a depressed position and then create the biomechanics that relate to impingement. Right. So instead of then treating that impingement, the first thing I'm going to treat is the liver, get the liver to move. That takes the body out of that protection pattern. So without ever touching the scapula, all of a sudden my scapula now is not downwardly rotated. And so now when I lift my arm up overhead, impingement doesn't happen. So in this scenario, if that's the first treatment I did, and all of a sudden this actually happened, I was treating my family member the other day. They've been complaining to me for months of shoulder and neck pain on the right. And they don't like to take care of themselves. So they wait till I get there to take care of them. And I evaluated them. It was taking me to their liver. I treated the liver, and then I never touched the shoulder. And then I needed to do something in their neck. And so I said, could you take your sweatshirt off for me? They took their sweatshirt off and they go, oh my gosh, I haven't been able to lift my arm up overhead to take my clothes off in months. And that was just with me doing a little bit of gentle treatment around the liver. And so that's sort of like how this is. The reason why the upper extremity is rarely issue is because the upper extremity is extremely influenced by the viscera because of the neural connections. What most people don't realize is the phrenic nerve is a sensory nerve for a lot of the organs of the thorax, the mediastinum, and actually the upper abdomen. So the liver, the beginning of the small intestine, part of the stomach, and all of the sort of mesentery in that area, the peritoneum in that area is innervated sensory wise by the phrenic nerve. So when an organ down there is not functioning well, it sends a message up through the phrenic nerve to the spinal cord and then to the brain of the distress, right? And because the message is so far away and only one nerve that goes to a lot of different things, the brain is not clear where that message goes. And so it gets a little mess, like the referral is basically back to the cervical plexus and to the brachial plexus, because remember, phrenic nerve is C3, 4, and 5, which is both of those plexuses. And so every muscle, every joint, every skin patch that is influenced by the cervical or the brachial plexus then is altered. So that could give us some scapular dyskinesis or glenohumeral joint instability, because the message now to the rotator cuff or the message to the trapezius muscle is not a clear message anymore, because it's been murked. The water's been muddied by the irritation to the phrenic nerve down in the gut.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like
So
playing
that's
a game of telephone almost. Like it took
exactly
from where it came to the brain, it's gone through like 5 people of saying telephone. So you got the message, but it wasn't 100% sure what's coming. And so how the body protects itself, which ultimately it's created to do, could be a variety of things and could cause that scapular dyskinesis.
Yes. And one of the main points too is not just at the nerve root level, but at that reflexive level of in the cervical plexus. One of the nerves that come from the cervical plexus is the nerve to the subclavius. That's literally the name of it, the nerve to the subclavius. So it innervates the subclavius muscle, which is the muscle beneath the clavicle. Most people don't realize how much the clavicle actually needs to move and function for good scapular mechanics. And also the space underneath the clavicle is where the brachial plexus comes out. Like it goes underneath there as it travels to your arm. So the brachial plexus has two areas now that can be irritated at the nerve root itself, or the upper part of the brachial plexus, or in the lower part at the, I think it's a cord level right there, right behind the clavicles. It can actually have like a thoracic outlet type syndrome, compressing and entrapping the nerves there. So you have two reasons, both again, originally from the phrenic nerves information, that can alter function to the upper extremity. So that's why it's like Jean-Pierre Barral will always say, like, if you have shoulder pain, like it's the liver.
That's amazing.
Always. Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
so the biggest, so it's almost like nice when somebody texts me and like, what should I do with my shoulder hurts? What should I do? And I'm like, oh, do this breathing thing, or do this, self massage around the liver or the guts. Like I almost always start there, because giving them a scapular exercise, like Y's, T's, L's, giving them rotator cuff stuff, it's not going to do anything.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So fascinating. It's
so
fascinating.
And this kind of going back to what we were saying, like, this is like this is what understanding the anatomy in a new way allows you to do, because once you understand anatomy, it's like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, first of all, people, do you see what I mean by like how this girl knows anatomy? Like she's like, I didn't even know the name of the subclavius muscle was the nerve.
Yeah. The nerve to the subclavius.
So, I mean, she knows anatomy, like amazing, but it's fascinating to me. And at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but when I learn new things, right, I'm like, I just get so enamored with just learning more, because I agree. It's kind of like, it just takes, we've all had patients that are just not getting better. And you're like, what is going on, dude? Like, I've done, whatever. I mean, total aside, but my mom fractured her patella and had, her repaired, whatever. And I went up to watch her do therapy, and the amount of wall walks I saw in this therapy clinic. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Please, like, haven't we moved past this? But to take this to another level, like I've even had people that I'm like, oh yeah, this, and I'll even go like, I'll go past the shoulder. I'll go posterior oblique sling. I'll go thoracic rotation, and still not getting better. Right. And then I'm like, what part of the puzzle am I missing here?
Yeah.
And when I took your course, so I took Anna's, is it called the cheat code? Is that what?
Yeah. You did the results cheat code. Yeah.
Results cheat code. I sent her a message during one of the presentations that she was doing, and I tried one of her, I think it was like the hip internal rotation one with some breathing, and I did it on one of my basketball players, and he literally, and that's what I was messaging you. He was like, "Are you a witch?" And I was like, "Anna, I just tried this on one of my players, and they think that I'm a witch." And it's because, and she was like, "Yeah, I get that all the time." So, but it was amazing, and how quick, just like in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. When you know where to start, when you can figure out where the body is protecting and treat there first, it takes barely, like, it doesn't, well, this is the whole premise. And this is what I learned from the Barral Institute, is like, when you're in the area that the body wants, you can do the shittiest, most crappiest treatment you want, and you're going to have these magic, quick, lasting results, because the body is the thing that's making you feel better, not the treatment.
Right. Yes. It's amazing.
And so the evaluation piece, and this is something that I've always been, even before the Barral Institute, I've always really been big at taking the majority of my time with somebody, evaluating them versus treating them. Because I know that if I, the better my evaluation, the better I can kind of narrow down where exactly to start, the better results I get. And this way of thinking takes it to the next level, because now, instead of using my bias as the clinician as the where do I start, right, believing that the foot drives everything, or the pelvis drives everything, or breathing mechanics drives everything, now I just get to ask the body, where are you protecting? Where should I start? And then once I can get the body to not be in a protection mode, then I get to use my brain and think about how it connects from an anatomy standpoint or from a movement standpoint, and then start using other things like to do whatever I want, to connect it however I like.
Right. Or strengthen afterwards or whatever.
Yeah.
or like,
that's what I mean by treat
Yeah.
wherever I want. Like, yeah, maybe I go into exercises, maybe I look somewhere else, but, you know, and then it makes you realize, well, the way it makes sense too is like, you know, when before the visceral stuff, when I went down the breathing rabbit hole back in the day, you know, like early 2000s, mid 2000s, I you know, you get a couple patients, you start with breathing, and it makes all the difference. It decreases their pain, it improves their ranges of motion. And you're like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to start with breathing. So then the next 5 patients come in and you start them with breathing, and like 3 of them also were great, but then 2 of them are like, no, nothing's changed. And so I found myself like scratching my head being like, why is breathing so magical for some people, but not for other people? It doesn't make sense with the story where we're giving around breathing being so important, like improving core stability and thoracic mobility and decreasing the nervous system, like all the things that are true, but we were believing to be the only reason why breathing was making an influence on their body. But now I realize that most of the time when somebody's got so much better that quickly with breathing, it was because they had a visceral issue. And breathing is a really easy way to mobilize the viscera. Right. And so, but now I have a new set of tools that I don't have to only use breathing. I can go in there with my hands or a cup or whatever, and actually be a little bit more specific and precise around what organ needs to be mobilized and how it needs to be mobilized. And now the result is even better than just doing the breathing exercises. And instead of needing 2 weeks with people, I need 2 sessions with people.
Amazing.
Right.
So that's a perfect segue into the LTAP. And so Anna, I'm so excited, is coming to my hometown of Miami, Florida in March. I'm going to say 2023, because I don't know when people will be listening to this podcast, but she is going to be teaching a live course on the LTAP, which she's going to go into what it is today. And selfishly, I just wanted to learn in person from her. So I'm like, hey, let's fly you out to Miami and do it. But now, similar to Anna, I don't want to keep all this information myself. I want as many people as can come as possible, because I do believe this will make better clinicians out of trainers, Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, physical therapists, the gamut. And I think I want to be a part of that. So can you give us a little background on like what we will learn in what the LTAP means, and then what we'll learn in the LTAP?
Yeah. So the LTAP stands for Locator Test Assessment Protocol. And it's basically, so with the Barral Institute, when we learn their work, part of the main evaluation is this thing called general listening. And it basically is like we learn how to use our hand to feel the entire body, to feel that protection pattern. That is by far probably one of the hardest things that they teach, like the hardest things for clinicians to trust and to get. However, it is the most powerful part of it because it leads us to where the body is protecting. Whenever I've taught, and this was true even when I taught for Exos, I always want to be teaching exactly what I'm doing right now because I know it works. I'm not going to teach you something I was doing 10 years ago because I'm not doing it anymore because I found something that worked better. So when I knew that when I was started to teach the movement rev methodologies and system, I needed a way to teach people how to find where the body was protecting, but it wasn't that general listening and local listening that the Barral Institute teaches for 2 reasons. 1, it's so difficult to learn. And 2, that's their way of doing it. And if I felt like, again, like I didn't want to just teach Exos things, and I don't want to just teach Barral Institute stuff. I want to teach you how I blend everything together. So it was really important to me to figure out a way to teach you how to get where the body's protecting without doing it their way.
Got it.
Not because it doesn't work, because it works great. I still use their way, but also because their way, it feels a little woo-woo, because you're laying your hand on someone and like, oh, it's your liver. And people are like, what? Like, how do you know that? So through their classes, we often learn, and this is not necessarily always in their curriculum, but depending on what teachers are teaching you, you'll learn different orthopedic tests to use to confirm what you're feeling in your listening hand. And so that had me sort of always thinking about patterns I would see, because what I would do when I would evaluate someone, I would go through my full orthopedic evaluation and my movement evaluation, like I've always done. And then I would also do this osteopathic listening. And so what I noticed when I paid attention is there were certain orthopedic things that always came up with certain osteopathic listening things. And so I just sort of like weeded out a little bit of like, if I use this combination of orthopedic tests, will it get me to the same spot as where my hand will? And so I tested it out. And then the first time I taught my Revitalize mentorship program, which is my 4-month online group mentorship program, I taught it to them and was like, I think this is going to work for you, but also try it out and give me feedback. And I was excited that when people started coming back to me and was like, holy crap, like, this is magical. This works. My clients are like, what the hell are you doing? And so then I started noticing that when I taught the mentorship, because it is so much information, I basically try to teach you everything I know and I've learned in 20 years in 4 months. And it's kind of like a fire hose a little bit. And so people would get overwhelmed, and I would tell them, if the only thing you learn in the mentorship, the only thing you take away from this whole 4 months is to learn how to listen to the body and figure out where to start treatment, that's the magic. That is where the magic is. So because of that, and the mentorship, the price point's really high too. So I wasn't able to reach as many people as I wanted to, because I want everybody to get results like this. I want everybody to have their patients look at them and be like, oh my gosh, you're magic. Right. Mm-hmm. For many reasons. But so I felt like, okay, I need to pull the locator tests out of the mentorship and make them their own thing. So because they are such an important piece of the puzzle, mm-hmm. because if you don't know where to start, you're sort of just throwing darts in the dark. Right. And so that's when I created the LTAP level 1 online course, which was a 6-week course that basically took you week by week through the LTAP, which is a series of 5 orthopedic based tests that help you to figure out where to start. Like, it's basically leading you to where the body is protecting. And it's none of them. Well, I won't say none of them are tests you don't do. Some people do these tests, some people don't. It kind of just depends on what orthopedic things you've learned, but they're all orthopedic tests. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a different way to use them. So that is like the beauty of it, is you don't have to worry about trusting your hand. You're going to get there eventually, but you're going to start building that trust of paying attention to what you feel by using tests you're already familiar with. Right. So it takes the woo-woo out of it.
I thought was phenomenal. Right?
Yeah.
Because also, even as a practitioner, as you go, it takes time to be quiet in your stillness.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Trust what you're feeling. Know where you are on the muscle group. Right.
Yes.
Like, are you on the psoas? Or are you on the abdominal aorta? I'm like, if it's giving you a pulse, you're not on the psoas. So like,
yes.
But
and it is funny because, I didn't realize that I wasn't always trusting what I was feeling in my hands until one of the classes at the Burrell Institute. And Ron Mariotti like pointed it out. He was like, when your hand is on someone, that is not when you should be thinking. Like if you have your hand on somebody and you start thinking about all the things it should be, you've already lost the battle. Take your hand off of them, take a deep breath, reset, put your hand back, and only pay attention to what you feel. Describe what you feel. And once I started doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, all my orthopedic things are giving me so much information too. I've never even noticed.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave me flashbacks back to like grad school, learning like joint mobs. And you get so frustrating because you're like, how am I supposed to know the difference between like grade one, grade two?
I know.
Right. And it's like, you'd get so frustrated with yourself because you were too busy thinking about what it should feel like instead of just paying attention.
You're so right. I
Yeah.
mean, so right. That's so true.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see it when I teach, like so many of the professionals now, like you and me, were like, they get so frustrated. And I'm like, stop thinking about what you should feel and just like,
what do you feel?
Slate in front of you. What are you feeling?
What do you feel? Yeah. The best course for me that helped me with that was taking all of the John Barnes myofascial release stuff. And I also think it was the teachers that taught with me. I took Dr. Carol Davis, who's like amazing.
Oh yeah.
She's just one of those people that I feel like I'm gaining knowledge even standing next to her.
100%. So, yeah, she's amazing.
And she would just be like, she said exactly like, what do you feel? I was like, I don't know what I feel. She's like, yes, you do.
Yeah.
What do you feel?
And
so you're absolutely right.
And when you don't want to say what you're feeling is because you're afraid to be wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. But you're like, and some of you too, at least for me, it was, some of me is like, I can't be feeling that. Like, that can't be true. Like, I can't actually be feeling their, cerebral spinal fluid, like the pulse of that. And then, you start to be like, no, I can feel that. Yeah. And that is what I feel. And I do feel the movement, and I do feel the resistance from the tissue in my hand. Yes. And you're absolutely right. You have to just, I think sometimes my clients like think I'm sleeping, but I'm not sleeping. I'm just trying to tune out the room around me and all the other input so that I can really feel what's happening. Yeah.
I close my eyes when my hand's on someone. My eyes are almost always closed. Yeah. And I can't talk to them at the same time. Like I try, but then as soon as I go into feeling like I start, like I just like my sentence just goes away. Yeah. And that's so important. And this is why, I'll speak on a lot of it. Like a lot of times when I'm teaching, I'm like, you got to let go of the ego. Like it's about letting go of your ego, because you are not the expert as much as you want to be, because you want to help somebody. The body is the expert. And when you can let go of that and you're okay being wrong, then it's way easier to describe what you're feeling, because there's no right answer. What you feel is specific to what your receptors are picking up, which even means that mine might not pick up the same thing. We're different people. We have different experiences, different sensitivities in our hand. And the other thing is, like, if you don't feel anything, that's okay. Like you got to start somewhere. And a lot of times I'm like, shoot, I don't feel like I feel anything. But so then it's like, just be okay with that. And I always tell people, if you don't know, think about, like, pay attention to it. Think about how it felt. Just do a treatment and then go back to it. And did it change? Because oftentimes you'll be more aware of what it felt like when you feel the change, because then you're like, oh, so true. There's the movement I was wondering. So I didn't feel it because it was not moving at all. Right. And now that it's moving, it's more clear. And so that moment, that before and after, just made you smarter. Like it tuned your hand and it tuned your brain in on the pattern now for the next time. And so it's like, that's why I'm like, stop, like, don't worry about it. Just, the anatomy. If you're in the right spot, you're in the right spot. If you don't feel anything, you don't feel anything. Do the treatment, come back. Has it changed? Yes or no?
And I think it also is a big thing for a learning curve to say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm feeling. Okay. Cause I think as we're taught in school so much of like, you have to name it. And sometimes, like, I remember coming out of school and the annominates and all of this kind of stuff. And I was so wrapped up into naming it, which is the torsion, and finally I was like, and even when I teach students now, I'm like, I don't care what you call it. I don't care.
Yeah.
All you know what you feel, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like this ASI is lower, this one? Do you feel the sulci different? Just name what you feel. And then by basis of the anatomy, you can understand what's happening to the muscular structure around it. Or you're absolutely right. Going back and saying, oh, I do feel a difference now is
Yeah.
so powerful to do that. And I think that's such a great, I'm telling you, I don't give compliments easily because I'm a hard ass, but at least for me, I've learned a ton from you in not just how you explain it, that's one, but also how you relate it to things that we see all the time, right?
Yeah.
So how you relate it to swelling, like your swelling protocol is amazing. How you relate it to ankle mobility or shoulder mobility. And so it becomes so, instead of this like biotensegrity and all this stuff that seems very out there, which is hard for some people to conceptualize, especially us left-brained, like rigid thinker type thing.
Mm-hmm.
You just make it like, this is what we see when we see with swelling. And it makes so much sense that,
Yeah.
if I can be a small part of bringing your teachings to people in person, I'm so excited about that. So
Yeah.
if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see I have you up here already.
I love it.
March 4th, March 5th. This is my quarter on a wall. So I'm sorry, you hear my dog now barking. So March 4th and March 5th in Miami, Florida, Anna Hartman will be here teaching the LTAP live. And because it comes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but because it comes with video trainings that they will have access to forever, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We get to learn the stuff that I took the LTAP online. So like I learned a lot of this stuff, but so in the weekend will be like real hands-on learning. Is that correct?
Yes. There's, it is a hybrid. So there's 4.5 hours of pre-recorded videos that you'll have access to as soon as you sign up, that you can start learning it today. And then come to the course March 4th and 5th, and it'll be primarily all hands-on. I don't want to sit in a lecture, right? So anything that could be lecture is already recorded and ready to go. And then we're going to spend the 2 days just learning it and getting the reps of feeling it in our hands and having me there. So you can have somebody sort of like check your work or ask questions for your hand placements and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's going to be super hands-on. And then too, after we're done, there'll be an option for you to sort of like, if you feel like you still need the support, you can upgrade your experience and then just go straight into the 6-week online course and like do like a week by week continued education, but you don't have to. It's basically set up where it's like, you're going to always have the videos to reference and then the hands-on experience in those 2 days. So
yeah. And then if you get to experience Anna in person, then your next step is just to sign up for her Revitalize mentorship.
The LTAP does lead directly into the mentorship. And so
a plethora of knowledge.
Yeah,
for sure. And let's make sure to tell people that it's not only for physical therapists. You teach this to everyone. You even give, so even in the online course that I took, she gave, can't think of the words, options for those that may not have a license to mobilize or any of that stuff. So it could be Pilates instructors, athletic trainers, massage therapists, would you say?
Okay. Pretty much anyone in the health and wellness field. So whether you touch or don't have a license to touch, it's still very applicable. Yeah. So, if you're not used to evaluating somebody, there's going to be a learning curve because you're going to have to start evaluating people, but that's how you're going to get better results is you're going to evaluate them and figure out where to start. Yeah. But yes, every test has an option that you can do hands off, which is great for people who are not licensed to touch, as well as if you're doing any virtual assessments. And it's great to use in the virtual space as well.
Great. And so we will link this up in the show notes and we'll say it again at the end, but can you read off the link? Do you know the link by memory of like where they can go to register?
No.
Okay. You know what?
But if you
I
just
think
go
I
to
can
my
pull it up.
Instagram, it is linked on my Instagram.
Hold on. I'm
It's
gonna
because
pull
it's a
it up right here.
teachable sales page. So
I know. I'm gonna see if I have, if the URL is really, really long, I'm going to, hold on, let me see. And we're gonna link it up in the show notes anyways, but okay, let's see. Oh yeah, it's a really long, it's a
yeah.
very long one. So I'm going to link it up in the show notes. So we're just scroll down to where you're listening to on this podcast, scroll down to the bottom. There'll be a link there. You can go in and register. My entire team, I'm sending my entire team. So you'll also get to see me in sunny Miami, Florida in March 4th and 5th, 2023. Okay. I don't know when you're listening to this.
Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I just wanted to kind of ask you if you could give us a little bit of, because you also are a female business owner, which is also a lot of people that I mentor, and you've kind of, you do still see people, you actively see people, but you've created this kind of like online revenue stream for yourself as well as in teaching others. And I'm curious as to what those kind of growing pains are, because at least for me, being a practitioner is like riding a bike to me. Again, I'm always learning, but it's kind of what I do. So it's a little bit easier, and learning the business side of it was definitely a little more challenging. So do you have any maybe advice out there for people that are embarking on this online space now?
Just to keep going. I mean, that's the biggest thing is like, don't get discouraged or take it personally. Like it just takes a lot of repetitions and iterations and testing. And, I think it's, testing and testing and testing. And I think the hardest thing is like, if you have one good launch, chances are the next one will suck. The second round always sucks for people. And I think that nobody really talks about that. And that then that's probably the moment when people want to quit. And just know that that is just how it works, because you have a lot of people who want to buy from you really quickly because they love you, which are your supporters that you are so grateful for, and you will treat them right. But then after that, you have a realization that it's like, oh, I actually have to sell what I'm doing. And it forces you to get better about selling it, like get better about speaking about it and why it's so great. And once you can get your wording right, and once you really understand what you have to offer, it doesn't actually feel like selling anymore, because you're just excited to get everybody the results.
Right.
And so that is when it sort of becomes fun. And I think too, the other thing is just like we would treat someone's rehab, like very clinical, of like you evaluate and you treat and then you reevaluate to see how your treatment did. Like this is the same thing in business. You evaluate, you do something, and then you see how it went. And if it didn't go the way you wanted to, then you tweak what you're doing and then do it again. So it's just assess and reassess. And when you can be really clinical about it and take the emotion out of it, it's such a better ride.
It is. And you know what? I'm glad that you brought up that second launch tanking, because by the way, if you haven't launched anything yet, she's correct. Your first launch is usually awesome. And that's usually just because those are your immediate people that are following you, and you don't have to do a whole lot of stuff. It's like when you first open your brick and mortar, and it's like your friends and family that come to your business, right? And then your second launch is that one. So it's everyone tanks their side. I did too. And then what usually happens too is you're like, either people give up or they scratch everything and start again. And so you have to, and that's where tracking data. So I'm just going to tell you guys this from like a marketing perspective. Tracking data is important because you don't have to scratch the whole thing, but you can scratch the one little piece of the puzzle that you can see by tracking your data that didn't work, right? And you can pivot on that. And if you guys want a great look at social media, go follow Anna. She's at Movement Rev. It's not the Movement Rev, it's Movement
No,
Rev,
just
right?
Movement Rev.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's at Movement Rev. And because so many people are afraid of showing people their trick, I'm doing this in like air quotes, their tricks, because they think, well, who's going to buy from me? But she's a perfect example. She shares so much online that when you look at her page, you're just like, either one, I want to work with her as her patient, or two, I want to learn from her. And so that's the thing. You've got to show, you can't tell people to buy from you. You have to show them why they have to, right? And so it's a huge testament to, and it didn't happen overnight. If you look at her Instagram, like it is a process, it is a slow process, but over time, I'll tell you, we've just started tracking my close length from discovery when people found out about Krista Gurka to close is more than 12 months from when people first find me till they buy. And so that means they've listened to my podcast, they follow me on Instagram, and their first buy, by the way, might be something that's like $200. So it's 12 to 18 months that people, that's a long sales cycle. So you just have to be patient. So
it's a long game.
Will you share with us your new podcast that's out and then where people can find you? And then we will wrap it up.
So my new podcast is called Unreal Results for physical therapists and athletic trainers. Super excited. There's a trailer episode out now, and then the episodes start next week, and there'll be weekly episodes. They'll be short, about 20 to 30 minutes max. And just sharing all this same stuff. So it's like how to get better results using a different lens of view, like understanding how the viscera and nervous system influence musculoskeletal injury, pain, and movement. So I'm so excited for that. It's been sort of, I don't want to say a long time coming, but people have asked me to do a podcast for a long time. I've been a guest on a ton of podcasts and I really like doing it. It's just, took me a while to figure out how I wanted to do it. And it's one more thing. So, and it will be, obviously it's available on any podcast player that you would use. And then it's also a video podcast on YouTube, my YouTube channel. So
awesome.
The best way to find me is on Instagram. So at Movement Rev, and then in my links, you'll find links to everything you need. So I do have that, where you could find the link to the Miami course is www.movementrev.com/links-ig. So
perfect. So we're going to link it all up in the show notes. Unreal Results, right?
Yep.
And then Movement Rev on IG, and she's movementrev.com on her website. Go see what's your YouTube channel? Is it Anna Hartman or Movement Rev?
Yeah.
Okay. She's Movement Rev everywhere, basically. Everywhere. And you will not, if you're a practitioner working with the human body in some capacity, you will not regret listening to her. If you're interested in coming to Miami, meeting me in person, meeting Anna in person, and learning a plethora of information, then go sign up for the March 4th and 5th workshop. It's going to be amazing. All right. And that's all I got for you. Go follow Anna, please. You'll learn so much. And until next time, my friends, bye for now.
See ya.